Thank you for having me, Charlie and Josh and everyone else. So, yes, I started out as a teacher and I was a teacher for 10 years and taught 5 years in Ohio middle school. And then when I moved to Florida, I taught 5 years here. And that was anywhere from second grade up to fifth, sixth. And so I loved it. I never planned on really stepping out, but life throws curveballs at times. And during that time, I became a single parent. And the only way that I could see supporting myself and my daughter was if I went into leadership. And so I went back and got my second master's, and this one was in educational leadership. Got ready to interview to become an assistant principal. And I had an opportunity to step out that at first I didn't take, but then I was told you might want to take it because if you leave to explore anything as an administrator, you will come back as a teacher. You will not come back as an administrator. And I went, hmm. Well, one thing led to another. I worked for a company that I was laid off. I worked for a company that was screamed at and cussed me out to the next minute hugging me. And so I just one day couldn't take it anymore. And I said, you know what? If you can run a company and treat people like this, I was the eighth person in 10 months in my position. I said, then I can run a company and treat people right. And I had no idea what that meant. I had zero knowledge about business pretty much. So it was just, yeah, so that was back in 2008. And ever since I've had the honor, the privilege of working with so many educators and from different capacities, mostly around in the beginning, how does the brain learn? And that's what my 8 books are on, and how do we engage students based upon that. But it's shifted for various reasons. And now it's Ignite Your Shine. And it's my passion and working with corporations. And we're really starting to partner more on women in leadership.
Oh, I love it so much. All right, so we've talked about the Shine framework a little bit, but I want you to kind of expand on that because it's so impactful. And so, will you just kind of explain the framework more so, really, because I know it enhances student learning and well-being. So, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing out, what you've built.
I would love to. And you know what? Since my new friend Sabrina, they did little hands-on, we're gonna do a little hands-on too. So
Love it.
I want to take you through the SHINE framework. And just so you know, it was originally I was going after in education how we define SMART because we're phenomenal at putting our kids into a box of reading, writing, math, and science. And I think our students are way more than that. And then I also realized that when we talk about gifted students, we take it even further, at least here in the United States, with math and science. And that was something that really bothered me. And I think back to how many times I said to my students, Jesus and Sarah and Carlo had to gifted. And I told all my other students they weren't gifted, is essentially what happened without saying it. But that's what I said. And so I realized it's every person, every child is gifted. The question is how. And so someone said to me, you'll never change, LaVonna, the definition of smart in education. And part of my personality was like, watch me, right? And then, of course, self-doubt creeped in, and I was like, oh, what if they're right? And so the word shine popped in my head. And so I'm going to take you through it. It is an acronym. In other words, we use it as a framework to guide. And so the letter S is self. And what we really focus on wholeheartedly is what are your strengths, gifts, skills, and talents. Now, for simplicity, I'm going to use the word strengths tonight, but it really is the things that you're born with and the things that you develop. So, Gallup research says that a strength of yours will remain a strength, but your weaknesses will never get to the level of a strength. And so, when we look at Gallup research, if what we do is we beat ourselves up over this all the time. But what if we're to use our strengths instead? And so, when we think about with students, how do we come using their strengths? What are they good at doing, and how might we teach through that lens? Instead of them constantly hearing not intentional, not constantly hearing that's not quite where it needs to be. You need to go back and work on these 3 problems. I need to pull you and you for small group. Oh, so close but not 100%. This is what they hear often. And so what if we flip this model, which is a goal? Now I said interactive, so my degree was actually teaching the deaf, so I'm going to sign with you. And so if you put your thumb out like this, like you're hitchhiking, all right, and then you turn your hand 180 degrees against your chest. All right, so if you think about where your rings are sitting, that's what should be touching your chest. So it's not flat like this, it's where the rings would be. So when we teach this to students, we say basically, this is you, and you're putting you close to your heart to love you and care about you. All right, so this time I want you to do it, but I want you to say the word self out loud. And if you're around other people who don't know what you're doing, let them think you're crazy, okay? So go ahead, self. Yes, I feel like I heard you. At least saw some lips move. All right, so self. So really, again, strengths, gifts, skills, talents, but that goes into anything. It goes into your growth mindset. It goes into your self-care. It goes to everything and anything. And what's crazy is I meant this to be for students, but I had military, police officers, superintendents, board of directors coming up and saying, "You have no idea how badly I needed this." And I went, "Josh, this is actually a human thing, right? This isn't a student thing." And so when we say S for self, that leads us into H. H is heart, and heart is around really it's passion. Like what lights you up? What gives you that energy? What do you get based on Mihai Csikszentmihalyi talks about flow. So when you get into the flow of something and you lose track of time, you're like, it's probably been 30 minutes and it's been 2 hours. What is that? That. And we're digging into that, whatever that is. And so heart is what I use because P would be passion and ignite your spine is not going to be the same as ignite your shine. So we are going to use H for heart. Now I do modify the sign and sign language and I'll explain why. So heart is really about passion, which we would be signing like this is the sign for hunger. And that's not what we meant with this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your middle fingers and you're going to trace the shape of a heart. So again, this is modified. Okay. So H for heart. And I use middle fingers because middle fingers in sign language actually represent emotion. In case you missed that, middle fingers represent emotion. Got it. All right. So this is going to be heart passion. The two together are super important. S for self, H for heart need to come together. This is what we call the shine spot. Okay. And here's why. If you are really good at something, but you don't love it, you will burn out. It's a fact, right? You get bored. If you're good at something, or not, sorry, not you love something, you have a passion for it, but you're not good at it, that's more like a hobby. So the way I think about this is if you were to say to me, LaVonna, you are so good at organizing, you should go into people's homes and organize their closet for a living. And I'm like, you know what? I would be pretty good at that. I don't have a passion. I'm going to burn out over time. If we flip it and I have a passion for something, all right? So let's say I love to sing. Like I love to sing. It is not a strength. I will own it. It is not a strength. So my husband, for example, will sing around the house and he just starts in, and I don't even know I do this, but I jump in. And one day he looked at me and he goes, LaVonna, this is not a duet. Okay. It is now because I made it one, right? But I get it. He doesn't want a terrible singer with him. So my dream of singing every night on the stage in Vegas with Mariah Carey is not going to happen. They don't want it. All right. So when we talk about the two together, this is why it's important to have both. This is more happiness fulfillment because not only are we good at it, but we love it or as much as we can. When we get to I is inspire, inspire. So life is going to throw those curveballs. We all know that, especially as adults. We've all experienced all kinds of stuff. Okay. So with that, how do we stay inspired? And we have the responsibility of inspiring others. So it's my favorite sign and sign, which is a little hard to do on Zoom, but bear with me. All right. So you put your fingertips together, but you're going to start down by your belly. All right. Now, as you come up, bring your hands up, you're going to open them. Yes, like throwing confetti, or maybe these are flowers blooming, right? But they're blooming fast. But my friends, my new friends, you have to make sure that you use your facial expression, your body language, because if I said to you, I'm not very inspired, right? But yeah, I love that, Dr. Monroe. That yes, like you're like, "Yeah, bring it on. Like that's the inspiration. Yes, I love this. So you're showing through sign language how inspired you are. N is navigate. Navigate. So we have S for self, we have H for heart, I for inspire, but N for navigate, I'm going to modify this sign because navigate is talking about everything you're doing that I've already talked about. It's you putting everything, that greatness about you into action. And so navigate though in sign language in ASL, American Sign Language would be this. It would be like search. That's not what we're referencing. So we're going to modify this. You're going to take your hands, put them parallel, and you're going to move them like the curvy road. Yeah. So like a curvy, I love that. Yes. And here's why, because this is about goal setting. This is about your story. This is about your journey. And we would love to say, this is you and this is the goal. And it happens like that. It doesn't. It does this. We get off the path, we get back on the path, we get off the path, and sometimes we start a new path. That is okay. That is when we learn so many life lessons and benefits and strengths, takeaways, you name it, comes from a lot of times when we're off the path, when we have those challenges, in other words. But then we figure out how to get back on the path. So that's navigate. And then E and shine is exceptional because you are becoming the exceptional person, leader, family member, educator, fill in the blank. You're becoming the exceptional person that you were meant to be, not anybody else who you were meant to be. And so E for exceptional is a little bit harder to explain, but you're going to take your non-dominant hand. Okay. So I'm right-handed. So my left hand is going to come up. Okay. If you're left-handed, put your right hand up. You can mirror in sign language. It's fine. All right. So I'm right-handed. My left hand is up. Notice that looks like a number one, but it's facing you. In sign language, this can represent a person also. So I imagine this is a person standing in a crowd of people, and we're going to take your dominant hand. You're going to grab their head and you're going to bring them up and across. Yeah, I know it's mirrored, right? So here's what I want you to do. If you are right-handed, start lower left, closer like where your arm just naturally sits, and bring it up across to the upper right. So lower left, upper right. If you are left-handed, you're gonna start lower right and just come up across to the left. Yes, that is beautiful. And there you have it. That is what Shine the framework is about. And it gets applied in so many ways beyond what I ever imagined.
Oh, I love the sign language piece of that, LaVonna. I don't know if I've actually seen you do that before. Maybe it's been too long, but I absolutely love the kinesthetic piece of that. All right, so let's talk about just about with students and kind of some practical tips and ways teachers can really amplify. I love what you did with the two pieces there of strengths and passion. But for our teachers, our educators, our administrators, how can they discover and develop the unique strengths and passions of their students and kind of bring that out to make them exceptional, like you were talking about?
Yes. So, first of all, I think, age dependent, there's always the
Yes.
conversation, but how you do it might vary. And this is where I know that you all have your expertise to be able to figure that part out. So I'll kind of do a blanket here that you can help modify or always reach out. I'm happy to support or figure out how to approach this. But one, it is about recognizing and having those discussions. Like I would say my theme tonight is probably going to be conversations. Have the conversations with the students, right? Have them with each other and to begin to highlight those strengths. What are you good at? Because a lot of times in society, we are taught you do not talk about what you're good at doing because you're bragging. No, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Those are two very different things. And so if we begin to elevate that it's okay for me to say, this is what I'm good at doing, because I also recognize that I'm not great at everything. And I'll recognize and share that too. But if we look at the focus of strengths and have those conversations, teachers can first start to highlight those things. Like, tell me when you did this project, what did you think that was a good strength of yours? What came a little bit easier? And so you start in, but then the goal is to switch that to the students being the detectives. So maybe they're getting in groups and they're having the conversations around where did you really feel you excelled in this project or this assignment? What was it specifically that you were doing? What parts were a challenge, but you noticed other classmates were rocking it out? What were their strengths in that moment? And this was something that I discovered totally by accident. And I was working with a whole group of students. I had my classes. And when this came about, because I was a perfectionist, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I wanted that I hide anything I'm not good at doing. I used to. And so one day I decided to not do that with my students. And I said, I'm one of the best artists in the entire world. Like, I'm going to draw the state of Florida on the board and don't even try to keep up because I'm that good. And they were like, oh, okay. And I drew it, not kidding, turned around. Their faces were like, oh my gosh. And one boy raised his hand. He goes, Miss Roth. I said, yes. He goes, that's Florida. I was like, yeah, that's Florida. And so but is uncovering like that's another strategy is to share some of those. But I ended up asking questions and saying, how many of you are good at drawing? And the hands went up. And I ended up asking all these other questions. And then at the end, I said, raise your hand if on every question I asked, your hand was up. And not one hand went up. And I remember thinking, holy cow, I hope you all recognize this. And I pointed it out to them. And that was the best year ever. I wish I had done that all the other years because now it was no longer, hey, you're not good at that. It's easy. What are you, stupid? I didn't allow those comments anyway, but they happened. They weren't even happening because now it was a, hey, who's good at this because I'm not? I'm having a challenge with this particular part. And other kids were like, hey, by the way, if you're not good at this, this happens to be one of my strengths. Come see me. And it totally opened the door. But we have to have the conversations and knowing that it's okay to say what you're good at doing, because you also recognize that you can rely on others and turn to others when you're not. And I'll share one more story because this was with teachers. And I had said this exact same thing, like share with each other the strengths that you have. And one teacher looked at me and she said in front of her colleagues, she said, LaVonna, you want me to admit what I'm not good at doing. So I'm going to tell them or go to one of them and say, I'm not good at this. She goes, do you know how that makes me look? Respect, total respect. I hear you. And I said, let's try flipping the script. And I said, Rachel, if she were to come to you, because it's something you're good at doing, she came to you and said, hey, I'm not actually good at this. Could you help me? How would you feel? And she said, I would feel amazing. Like, I would love that if you came to me. And I said, sometimes we get so in our heads that we think of how we might look and we forget what it might actually do for somebody else.
It's really powerful. I love that story. All right, LaVonna, I want to talk about the path, right? You had done the hand signals, and I know that, for our students, that's a challenging and sometimes hard to navigate as far as where they're at. And I know we're talking different levels, but in what ways can teachers support students in navigating challenges and setbacks, both academically and personally?
Yeah, I feel like these are conversations that sometimes can be hard. And I know that in certain states, my own state, for example, there's a lot of things that we're not allowed to say,
Yep.
right? Like there's a list basically that I'm said when you come in, you cannot say these things. Okay, that's fine. We can work around that. So I know that there's variations for some of you on here as well, but knowing that it goes back to having again the conversations and allowing the students to highlight what is it that they are good at doing. And Josh, could you repeat the one part of the question? Just repeat the question for me.
Yeah, of
So
course. I was just
thank
talking
you.
about navigating challenges for students or potentially setbacks, both academically and personally.
Yes, yes, thank you. So I feel like it's a lot of like you decide as an educator or counselor, whatever your role is, how much you're willing to share with students. But when you also share, that's when they're willing to share. Like when I keynote, for example, I tell some pretty personal stories. Like they're pretty deep. And I do that because I've realized the number of people that supports. First of all, I began to realize I wasn't alone, but also those in the audience began to come up in story after story and saying, here I thought I was the only one, or wait a minute, you got through it, or you shared a story, somebody else came through it. I can get through this too. And I realize those conversations need to be had. So obviously with students, we have to figure out what's age appropriate and what's okay to share. But if we never unveil our weaknesses or we never talk about how we messed up here, but look what we did with it to fix it, or I messed up here, what suggestions would you as students have? That then allows them to start that reflection of what are the challenges and what they can do and how could they think about it differently and how could they reflect to figure out different solutions. And this is what I think is so powerful. And one of the greatest ways is everybody is reading articles with students, or they're doing a story or a novel or a historical event. All whatever the circumstances are, if there's people involved, almost every single story, if not all of them, have a challenge of some sort. Like that's kind of like, holy cow, here comes the climax, something's happening. Now what do we do? Well, that's an opportune time to talk about how did that person, whether it was a scientist or a historical figure, like I said, or whether it's a person in like a character in a story, how did they overcome that challenge? Or before you even get to how you came to the challenge, let's pause for a moment. Let's brainstorm all of the ways, good, bad, and ugly, that this character or this historical figure could have solved this challenge. And the reason I say good, bad, and ugly, because I think it's so important for our students to also think about the repercussions of the not good choices. Right. Like I remember one year my daughter was being bullied and she came home and she's like, Mom, I'm being bullied. And I said, when? And she said at lunch. And I was like, whoa, Mama Bear. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But Mama Bear did want to come out. I will tell you that. But, thankfully, maybe it's breathing techniques. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
use some strategies to calm and de-escalate
yes,
yourself
DS,
before. Yeah.
you bet. You bet. Let's get back into the thinking brain, not back here into like fight, flight, this case, So I said, I did ask her some questions though. And I said, so, tell me more about what she's saying. And she's like, well, she says things about you. Okay, now wait a minute. No, I'm just kidding. Again, I she said she is saying things about you, and I said, have I ever met her? And she said no. And I said, so she doesn't even know me. She's like, no. And I said, okay, so she's totally just doing this to get at you. And so I ended up sharing with her teaching with love and logic, if any of you are familiar with that. But one of the strategies is out crazy the crazies. And so they also teach you how to go backwards into all of the consequences. So the first thing I said to her is, well, I said to her, would you like some suggestions? And she's like, well, yes, of course. One, you want to ask permission. Now they're more apt to receive whatever it is you have to say. And why don't you do this? Well, that won't work because of this. Well, how about this? Well, that won't work because we shut all that down by saying, would it be okay? Would you be open to having some ideas? And so first thing I said to her was, well, you could punch her. And she went, Mom, I can't do that. My next question was, why not? And she said, well, I would get in a lot of trouble. Like I would get probably suspended at school. And then when I come home, it's going to be even worse. And I said, it is an option, isn't it? And she's like, yes. And I said, maybe not the best option. And then I gave her more options. So I feel like a lot of times we forget about this part to get students, because we know they're not fully developed here. And even when we're emotional, it's so hard to pull into more of where we're thinking cognitively. We get all emotion back here and sometimes like the brainstem. And so those kinds of questions and thinking through the consequences allows them to shift into that part to then be able to make a better decision.